Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, How the Right HCM Strategy Transforms Your Bottom Line. This webinar is sponsored by UKG and is eligible for HRCI, SHRM, and ATD professional development credits. I'm your moderator, Claude Werder of Brandon Hall Group. Thanks for joining us today. And we'll be talking about how your people strategy with the right technology, data, and approach can drive tremendous business results. And we have two great experts to discuss this today. Chris Kickless, Group Vice President and General Manager of UKG Ready, and Michael Rochelle, Chief Strategy Officer at Brandon Hall Group. A big thank you to UKG for sponsoring our event today. UKG is on a mission to inspire every organization to become a great place to work through HCM technology built for all. More than 80,000 organizations across all sizes, industries, and geographies trust UKG HR, payroll, workforce management, and culture cloud solutions to drive great workplace experiences and make better, more confident people and business decisions. With the world's largest collection of people data, work data, and culture data, combined with a rich experience using artificial intelligence in the service of people, UKG connects culture insights with business outcomes to show what's possible when organizations invest in their people. To learn more, visit ukg.com. Before we dive into today's content, let me tell you about Brandon Hall Group and what our great offerings are. We're a leading professional development firm that's been serving learning, talent, and HR executives worldwide for more than 30 years. We've advanced the growth and performance of millions of employees and leaders through our cloud-based platform, delivering evidence-based research, data, and certification programs that empower organizations to achieve excellence in every area of human capital management. Our impact spans more than 10 million employees and executives globally, supported by our comprehensive research library, strategic insights, and prestigious awards program. The slide shows a sample of the organizations we are proud to partner with. Speaking of awards, our Excellence in Action Awards program has just recently closed, and winners will be announced in a webcast on December 4th. Our Excellence in Technology and Education Technology Awards will be announced in a webcast on December 3rd. Beyond recognition, we have incredible learning and networking opportunities. Registration is open for our HCM Excellence Conference happening next year, February 9 through 12. This is where the top minds in human capital management come together. And coming November 19th at our headquarters in the Boca Raton Innovation Center in Florida is our Women in Leadership event. To register, you can go to www.brandonhall.com and click on the Events tab. We also invite you to participate in our research study. Links will be available after the webinar, or you can always visit brandonhall.com. All details and applications for everything I've mentioned will be available in a PDF you'll receive within 24 hours after the webinar. Now, a few logistics. If you have any questions during the webinar, please use the questions panel on your control bar. We'll leave time at the end. We're also recording today's webinar, and you'll receive an email within 24 hours with a link of the recording and a PDF of the slides. The chat box is open, and so we really hope you'll contribute over the course of the webinar. Just send us your thoughts, questions, comments, experiences. It makes the experience better for everyone, and we'll remind you a couple of times as we go. We really want your participation. Well, we have a lot we want to share with you today, and as you glance at our agenda, I want to bring Chris and Michael in here to tell you a little bit about themselves. Chris, we'll start with you. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Claude and Michael. It's great to be here with you as well. I am beyond excited to be here with you. I was just looking over my LinkedIn the other day, and I realized that I had been in the HCM space now for 20 years, and I can't even believe it. It feels like time is absolutely flying by. I am passionate about helping companies become a great place to work and really helping businesses grow and scale. As somebody who has, like I said, been in the HCM space for a long time, I also have been a business owner, business leader, running my own businesses before I got to UKG, and I bring that mindset to everything that I do here, and just really thrilled to share with you some of the amazing information that we've got. Michael?
Great, thanks, Chris. Michael?
Chris, it's always a pleasure. So I'm looking forward to our dialogue, looking forward to getting some great audience interaction. I think this is a white hot topic that we need to get covered, and I'm looking to do the 360 on it, as they say. So, for folks that don't know me, I'm Michael Rochelle. I am the Chief Strategy Officer, a Principal Analyst, and one of the principals here at the Brandon Hall Group. I've spent 40 years in the space in a variety of roles. I also work now overseeing our research and advisory work for organizations around the world. And I'm really excited to share what I'm seeing and what our organization is seeing as it relates to these topics. So let's get it started.
All right, let's do just that. Well, we'll start by discussing the business case for a people first approach. Business leaders are being asked to do more with less, to scale faster, and to stay competitive in markets that are, constantly changing. And yet, one of the most powerful levers for achieving all of that is your people strategy. And it often gets treated as sometimes an administrative function or even an afterthought rather than a growth driver. So today we're going to flip that script, show you exactly how the right people strategy can directly transform your bottom line. But before we dive too deep, I thought I'd ask Michael and Chris, what does people first really mean today? And why should executives care about it more than ever? Michael, let's start with you.
People first is a challenging conversation for many organizations because they have the best intentions of doing it. But then how do you balance that with business outcome and business objectives and driving that? It takes a very unique culture to do that. The real principle around people first is thinking about impact as it relates to how is everyone in my organization going to react to making this happen? What are the implications for them? Are we taking into consideration everything that they need to know? Do they feel included in the process? Do their opinions matter? Do we value the work that they do? And most importantly, are they ready to take on the things that we're asking them to do? So it's a challenge, but at the same time, it's an opportunity to really engage our employees and drive business impact all at the same time and create a high level of engagement and motivation with our workforce.
Chris?
I couldn't agree more with what Michael had to say. And I think if I think about what could be added to that, it's starting with what it's not, right? So if you are, and I'm sure that all of us can relate to this at some level, if your first conversation or your first line of discussion with anybody in your organization has to do with your business metrics, then you're not taking a people first approach. If you're not first prefacing with what you're saying with something that has to do with your people, even if it's the way that you're presenting the data out to somebody. Like if you're going to somebody, you have to deliver some bad news or you're expecting some bad news, to start with, hey, I want to be really open and transparent with the information that I'm about to share with you, right? Just that one little shift away is really different, right? Because if you
Mhm.
went in and you said, I've got bad news, here it is, or here's our sales results without prefacing it with I'm being open and transparent so that people understand that that's what you're building, it's really not taking that people first approach. And as we'll see throughout the rest of this presentation, it makes a significant difference.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more, Chris.
So, Chris, from UKG's perspective, you work with a lot of mid-market company. What's the financial impact when organizations do take the right people first approach?
Well, when we use technology to achieve the balance that we're talking about and really unburden managers and employees with streamlined, purposeful people processes, has a really profound impact on all kinds of areas that make for a productive workforce. There's really critical factors like cost reduction, turnover, absenteeism, the reduction of incidents, especially safety incidents. All of those areas you can see real major improvements in. And that's beyond just the financials, right? A lot of times we think about just bottom line financials, but there are so many other pieces to thinking about our people and what that can actually mean to us and how that can improve our operational success. Like when we go out and we look at companies who are certified great places to work, we see huge impacts like a 50% reduction in turnover, a 34% reduction in absenteeism, and 41% fewer safety incidents around the board. So that's just like some of the soft costs. And you're going to hear me talk about soft costs a lot when it comes to really unlocking the potential of really tapping into your people. But the financial things I think are even bigger. So let's move on to this next slide, because this just blows my mind when I see this. Companies that are certified great places to work, like of the top 100 companies that we look at, have an 8.5 times more revenue per employee than companies who aren't. Like, this is just absolutely incredible difference. The revenue per employee is a KPI that's tracked by business leaders, and it really helps determine that revenue generated per individual working at a company. It's a super simple calculation that divides the total number of revenue by the total amount of revenue divided by the total number of employees, and it's an indicator of your productivity and profitability. Right. So it's one of those things that you can take all of those soft costs that I was just talking about earlier and translates that into direct revenue and profit that your companies are seeing. People are expensive, and they're getting more expensive all the time. Last year, wages rose faster than productivity levels. And in 2025, benefits costs for employees are expected to rise significantly. And companies really need to know how they're going to maximize their most expensive and their most precious resource, their people. A disengaged employee is money lost. And it's just really incredible. Like, there are some studies that show that about $15,000 per year or more is the productivity loss that you could have by having a totally disengaged employee.
So Michael, anything to add there? What's the biggest mindset shift that you see when organizations move from kind of uh, when they're trying to get started and making the business case? Sorry.
That's again the tricky part, right? You're balancing two very carefully planned ideas. There's a business case, but you're trying to apply it to a people first approach.
Right.
So, there in of itself, if you think about it like a seesaw, the fulcrum has to be culture. So, that has to be the thing that evens everything out. So, if we are going to try to build a business case, we have to make sure that we've set up a cultural mindset within the organization that still translates to keeping the employee front and center and how you go about achieving this results. And we can't let it get out of balance. We know we've got to maintain that fulcrum center, and we have to maintain the balance between the two. But if you're nailing me down to one particular thing, is I would challenge everyone in the audience to say, before I do something really important in my company, how many people do I run it past? That's a really good barometer for whether or not you're building a good business case that has a people first approach. If we're not doing that at an individual level, small team, task force, all the way up to department, business unit, and overall, then we're probably already heading down the wrong path.
Great point. So I mentioned earlier that we want to get you involved, and you please feel free to put comments and experiences in the chat. But we also want you to participate in our polls. So our first poll question today is: what are organizations' challenges in implementing a people-first strategy? And you can select all that apply here. And the answer choices are lack of executive buy-in, limited budget and resources, difficulty measuring ROI, resistance to change from traditional HR practices. And then if you have something that you think that's not on this list, feel free to add it to the chat. What we find in our research is the top answers tend to be the limited resources and the difficulty measuring ROI. We tend to see less people saying there's resistance to change, although there's some of that. But the top answers tend to be the budget and the ROI.
Michael, one of the things that when I'm talking to SMB and mid-market customers, there's always reasons, right? When it doesn't matter if you're making this kind of change or any other kind of transformational change, anything that's hard, that it's so easy to come up with reasons. Like, I'm looking at option E, other things that you can add. Like, I would love for people just in the chat right now, just start tossing out all those other reasons, because sometimes if you start listing out those reasons, it helps you kind of get those out of your mind, right? Because our mind is one of those crazy things that just loves to make up reasons why we can't do something.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I'll start to formulate in the chat is the idea that in that E, It really comes down to how ready is the organization to take this on.
Mhm.
You know, it's kind of inferred through A3D, but how many times do HR organizations have the best ideas, something like a people first strategy, and they're just up against, an incredibly difficult sledding challenge with the organization being ready itself. In our research, it's one of the key indicators that we always ask is what's the organizational state for any HR initiative, and that's just one of those factors that I think would fall squarely into Ian. I'm kind of seeing it as people are chatting about it now. The other one I throw out really quickly that is near is technological advancement. I mean, one of the things that's super important is we have to understand and embrace the fact that we're in the most extraordinary technological transformation. And that's a challenge in and of itself. How do you get up to speed in understanding that technological transformation? How could you even run a requirements gathering session or look at selecting a provider without being on top of all of that? And when you take all of these factors from A through D, those are kind of things that stop us from having that mind share. How fast can we catch up with all of this technological transformation? So I'm sure folks are chatting about that right now too, but I would throw out those two ideas into category E.
Great, thanks. Let's move on to our next topic, which is um, something that might seem intangible, but has very tangible financial consequences, and that's trust. Here's what we know from our research and our experience with clients. The companies that rank as high trust workplaces consistently outperform their competitors. We're talking higher retention rates, we're talking better customer satisfaction scores, and yes, stronger financial performance. So this slide is from a recent Brandon Hall Group study. Shows that the top leadership competencies related to talent retention is about building trust, leading with empathy and emotional intelligence, and creating a sense of belonging and psychological safety. But the challenge is if you're running a lean team, if you're in growth mode, if you're trying to do more with limited resources, how do you actually build that high trust culture? So, Michael, when you look at high performing cultures, what are some of the factors that show up uh, in your work with clients?
The number one for me is deprogramming leaders from being alphas, goal setters, and achievers. That's the first thing. We have to deprogram them. We have to get into that neural network, and we got to start like clipping out some wires and putting in new modules. We've trained our leaders to go out there and do whatever it takes to get it done in the world of OKRs and balanced scorecards and everything else. It's always been difficult. If you go back to Daniel Goleman's work back in the late 90s with emotional intelligence, it's the number one thing that's a challenge to get into leaders' minds. Is like, how do you balance out this soft stuff, this people stuff, doing all the things that are on this slide or is inferred on this slide, and still meeting the objectives, still knowing that we have to get things done. So that's where I would start first is you got to kind of reshape the thinking and reshape actually the emphasis and priorities of leaders to incorporate this and embrace this. The second thing is that I think you have to make leadership part of everybody's job. When we look at our award-winning case studies, there's a lot of companies now that are putting organizations putting forward of a end-to-end, top-to-bottom approach to driving leadership competencies within every organization. Like, who would not want to lead with empathy and emotional intelligence or have a high level of trust at any level of the organization? So that's true leader. And then the last one I think is important is trust is given. And so we have to earn it. And I think we have to spend more time with employees saying, what are we doing to have them trust us? And what do employees need to see for us to trust them? And that kind of gets to the heart of that employee value proposition. But it's earned, it's not handed out, it's not recognized, it's not rewarded. It's a slow build. We know that in our personal lives. And so we have to take the time. So in a fast moving organization, speed of business and all of that, trust is going to be, a lag indicator. And so in an organization moving that fast, we have to speed up that process.
Great, thank you. And so, Chris, I know UKG has extensive research on this too from Great Place to Work. What's the most compelling connection you found between the
Well,
trust piece and the financial piece?
I think it really lines up very well with what you found at Brandon Hall, and it has to do with that belonging and that psychological safe and environment to work in. I think is really, really key. And we find that in a couple different ways. And Michael, you mentioned it earlier when you said that one of the indicators you could have is how many people have you talked to about this, right? So how many people have you talked to? But there's the flip side to talking to somebody else is the listening piece of it. And that plays such a really big role. Feeling like you're listened to, that you and those around you have had opportunities to voice your ideas and your suggestions, to give feedback to the company, goes a really long way when it cultivates that feeling of trust and a collaborative environment. And everybody wants to work in a collaborative environment because that's how you feel like you're actually contributing. We really feel that culture of collaboration leads to cooperation, right? That you can count on people to cooperate with you. That is such a big deal, and doesn't just necessarily mean that your managers. Another thing, Michael, that you said that I thought was really brilliant is that leadership starts with everybody, not just leaders, right?
Right.
We sometimes think that leaders. I think it's really interesting when we think about org charts and structures. We sometimes speak about, okay, well, it's not me, it's the person above me, because that's really the leader, right? But that doesn't work. Everybody in the company has to be expected to be a leader at whatever it is that they're doing, or out in the wild, even. Like, you're always representing your company, whether you believe it or not, right? But so how do you do that? We think that cooperation and collaboration is just a huge driver of outcomes. Absolutely huge driver in outcomes. Matter of fact, we find at companies where employees feel psychologically and emotionally supported, they are 8.2 times more likely to make a bigger discretionary effort. Right. So it has this direct impact of you feeling like you're listened to you actually standing up and taking more action all on your own to be more productive, which to me just absolutely blows my mind. I think it's really, really incredible the difference that can make when people feel trusted, they feel like they're listened to, they put in more effort without you having to do anything else.
I'm going to riff on that a little bit, Chris, too, because I think there's another layer to that when we talk about psychologically, emotionally supported, is the idea that mind share is at a premium right
Yeah.
now. People are getting completely stressed out because they're getting their brain fractured into a million pieces. And every time they do something, people expect them to have like their undivided attention and be like it's the first thing they did, first thing in the morning. And I think that creates a lot of psychological and emotional stress. It's a stretching of mind share. Couldn't agree with you more. Like we've got to figure out what's also attainable. Like in a people first strategy, it's not the same as a business first strategy. And it comes down to exactly the point you're making is people can only do so much and do only so much correctly or in the time period that needs to be done or both. And so I'm glad you're pointing this out. And that's got to be part of the psychological and emotional support is getting people to have a reasonable mind share during the day and not be like stressing them out or they can't sleep at night.
Yeah, I think there absolutely is so much value in what you just said. We should unpack it a little bit more, right? There's this if you don't feel psychologically safe, if you feel like like people are just asking you to do more and more and more, and you're not in a safe environment where you can be okay to fail, or
Right.
be okay to bring up things that might be controversial or hard to talk about, because they're in business, there are hard things to talk about all the time, and we all have to feel like we're safe and able to do that. When the weight of the I can't do this at work sits on your shoulders, everything else feels like it's just piling on top of it, like you're carrying around a bag of rocks, right? And it's just going to
Yeah.
make you slower. You're going to think slower, you're going to react slower, you're not going to be as productive because in the back of your mind you're worried, you're concerned, you're overworking yourself because you don't feel like you can express your true opinions. Free yourself of those other things, and work becomes easy, becomes a joy, right?
Right. And I would add to that, I just got done publishing a Mindshare piece on just the centerpiece of being able to say no as well. Like there's you got to be able to say no. And do you have an organizational culture that leaders might hear the answer no or I can and not have that be punitive or there goes your performance review or so you're right. I mean, having voice and being able to say this is all I can do well is not a sign of weakness, but in many organizations it's thought of that way, and that's tremendous psychological stress. So I know we could talk all day about that one, Chris.
Actually, we could have a whole webinar just on
We
saying
could,
no.
we could,
I
we could
like
just do a
maybe we
part
should,
two to this.
yeah, note to self, because that's a really great topic. Well,
You're right.
there are other benefits too. Like we know that people who feel safe and psychologically like they're in a healthy place to be, they look forward to coming to work more often than their peers. They want to tell other people. Like you go out in the world and you brag about where you work. I work at an amazing place. Like UKG practices what it preaches. I'm out there every day. Like I'm wearing a UKG sweater right now. I will wear UKG branded stuff all the time when I'm out running errands. And other people do that too, right? You want people to be speaking about your company. People who feel safe at work will do that. And they tend to stay longer, which is awesome. There also is more excitement about coming to work. There's more pride in the places that they work, and they have an intention to stay even longer, right? And in this day and age, in the talent wars that we're in, that is such a major thing that's everybody's facing.
Let's go to our next poll, which talks about trust building and get more input from our audience. Which trust building initiative would have immediate impact in your organization? And you can choose more than one. You can select all that apply. Is it A, more transparent communication from leadership, better manager training and development, enhanced recognition programs, improved work-life balance policies, more opportunities for employee feedback?
You know,
And
now that I'm seeing these on here, I wish I had recommended one other change. And it's not just more transparent communications, but more transparent and authentic communications,
Hmm,
right?
I like that. And
Yeah,
meaningful.
really good point. Let's move now to
Can we
how
go back for a
organizations.
second, Claude,
Oh, sure.
to that poll? Because I think in seeing what's coming through and as far as answers and how people are feeling about things, one is, people are kind of looking at that better manager training and development. That to me has got like kind of like that. What does that really mean? So, Chris, what do you think that really means? Like, just better is kind of a weak word, right? So, what do we really mean by better manager training and development to build trust? What do you think?
But is, you know what I actually think it means is I think people mean different, not necessarily better. I think in the world of manager training and development, there's in this industry we have our go-tos. We have our go-to phrases that we say. We like it. I'm a huge TikTok time absorber, and I see all these people who have all these memes about what it's like to work in corporate, right? They've got corporate bingo cards or whatever, and I feel a lot of that comes from what we have with our training. I think we need to do different training where we have
Yes.
real authentic leaders who are saying here, being vulnerable, right? And this is how you have hard conversations. Here's how you actually do radical candor in practice, right? Here are the things that you can do to really transform the way you lead, not necessarily a formula. I think a lot of our current training for managers is very formulaic and not very experiential, which is where I think the magic happens.
Yeah, and I'll throw in on CND. There's some reactions. Enhanced recognition. How about having one?
Oh yeah,
Right? And then improve work-life balance. How about having one in the first place?
yeah.
So, that's some of the commentary too. So I think again, this is another follow-up, and I'm glad people are really biting on these answers and giving us some feedback.
I could talk for days on my opinion of
No
work-life
kidding.
balance.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, well,
Thanks, Claude, for
Yeah.
rolling that back for a
oh,
second.
sure. Yeah, great conversation. And so now we'll move onto making smarter decisions through predictive insights. And Brandon Hall Group's found in our research that HR organizations are much more focused than they used to be on predictive analytics, especially among excellence award winners. As this slide shows, almost 70% of award-winning organizations plan to leverage AI to predict attrition and improve workforce planning over the next year. And most award winners are implementing people analytics and insight systems, as well as using forecasting models. So, Michael, you've done a lot of work in this area. You've seen the maturity curve of how organizations approach workforce data. Can you walk us through what the progression kind of looks like from the basics to truly predictive insights?
Yeah, this is a great example of where people, process, and technology have to move at the same rate to get it right. As we get better at data stratification, data lakes, all those fun terms that come with data, comes down to, are we even working with the right data? So do we have people that understand what good data looks like, good structure, good stratification around that? And then the process itself, how do we go about collecting it? Like if you're having people say learn or do things every day or punch in and be on time, but you don't give them feedback on how they're doing it until they're in their performance review, and you tell them that they're habitually late or they didn't learn what they were supposed to learn. So getting the data to make sense, because to get analytics to work right, it's what you put in is what you get out. So that's the process part. And then the technology part, we look at a lot of technology as a firm, and UKG knows exactly what I'm about to say. It sounds pretty straightforward to do technologically, and then there's actually doing it properly and making it work right. So I would say those are the three things, but I think the lean in from our award winners is they see the value of being able to move from a retrospective, borderline reactive approach to what's going on with their organization and moving to a more prospective, proactive, predictive. But you got to be working with the right data and the right tech stack to make that happen.
Chris, you've worked with a lot of companies that use predictive insights. What's some good examples of the kind of value that they can get out of that?
I'm not a big time sports guy, but sometimes sports analogies just work really well. And well, I tell you what, so this is how this came up. I'm all about winning. Like I like to win, and that's the part about sports I like. Like I would I do enjoy hockey or soccer. Or if I go see a game, I'm going to cheer on somebody because I want somebody to do better than somebody else. And what we find is a lot of customers are like, I want you to tell me how I'm doing against my competitors. And
Mm.
at UKG, we've got tons of data, right? So we've got these external benchmarks in our People Insights product that can really tell you how you do benchmark against other customers. But what I actually think is more interesting is the yoga approach. Now, when you're doing yoga, they tell you don't pay attention to what anybody else is doing on their mats. It doesn't matter if somebody's more flexible than you are. It doesn't matter if you can't do this pose. You just get down in child's pose if this is too hard for you, right? It's all about you against you, and how are you improving? And we have this internal benchmarks product as part of our People Insights again that allows you to look at internally where are my outliers for things. So like if you're looking at overtime, for example, I really want to know where are my hotspots for overtime and where are they going to be? So using predictive analytics to see, do I have particular teams or do I have particular roles at my organization that are predicted to have more overtime than others? Are there regions where there's going to be, where we know there's going to be more overtime than others? And then can we start to correlate that with higher turnover and lower engagement scores or everything else? Like, how do we tie all of those predictions together? And what we find is that we can absolutely find these hotspots. And what we can do is say, instead of, this is another big problem that a lot of companies have, I have a problem with overtime, so I'm going to put a big policy in place that's going to be effect for every single person in my entire organization. And what we find is that you don't need to do it for your whole organization. You need to focus in on either a particular role or a particular location or a particular manager, or what is it that we can use that predictive insight to find, like where's the root cause of that? And let's get it in line with the rest of the business first. right? How do I improve those little hot spots instead of making broad sweeping changes? How do I really zero in surgically to fix that? And then you can worry about how am I benchmarked against other people. But let's get everybody else treated fairly and consistently across your own organization first. And it makes such a big difference.
Yeah, and I think that's the key to great talent intelligence, and that's what business stakeholders are looking for. They need, we can't have talent acquisition be our best friend and trying to get things done every day, and we can't
Right.
go out to the gig economy every 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Leaders are pushing very hard for these types of insights to say, back to the a sports analogy, what's my bench strength?
Hmm.
I know who's on the ice. I'm a big Bruins fan, of course, being in Boston. And by the way, my wife is a yoga instructor, and if I ever looked around when I was on the mat, I'd probably roll up and just walk out defeated. So I know exactly what you're talking about. But like, we got to know the bench strength. There's as much, and I think in a lot of times there's as much more intricate talent intelligence and understanding who your second and third line is in a hockey game, or who's on that bench that can come in order to make this happen, who can rise to the occasion. And so I couldn't agree with you more, Chris. It's like a great analogy.
So I want our audience to weigh in on one more poll question to get your input. And this one's on predictive analytics. What type of predictive analytics would be most valuable for your organization right now? And again, you can select all that apply, or if none of these apply, you can add to the chat. Turnover risk prediction, burnout and engagement indicators, workforce capacity planning, skills gap analysis, time to fill, forecasting, or something else that you can add to the chat. So I think here, what we tend to see most often is the burnout and engagement indicators and time to fill forecasting. But as I recall, our study, which had a similar question, the answers were spread relatively evenly because a lot of people experience all these things. Michael and Chris, any thoughts on this question?
Yeah, I was thinking, this is one of those polls that would I wish we could do different polls depending on where you were on your journey, right? Because your answer might be very different if you're just switching over to a people first strategy from a business first strategy versus somebody who's already been in that process for a while and somebody who's squarely believer and in the throes of it, right? Because what you are looking for predictors will change to more people focused predictors rather than just business focused predictors.
Yeah, I agree with that, Chris. This is going to be a movie where you're hitting the pause button and catching people at a certain frame in time. And if you play it like another minute or two, they could probably change their answers. I can see people saying, okay, at 12 o'clock today, I felt this way about these answers. If what's coming down the pike a month from now, I'm going to be worried about different issues. But I'll throw an E in there, Chris, and see what you think about it. And that is just basically, can predictive analytics predict success? That's the hard part in a people strategy, is can it really predict success? Everyone wants that. Everyone wants the crystal ball that says, if I do all of this, if I follow what I learned, will I be successful? And I think that's the hardest one to try to figure out with all of this.
I, I actually feel like it's kind of like the therapist piece, right? A therapist can tell you
Yeah.
exactly what you need to do, but it's not until you take the action that's actually going to make the difference. So you can have all the predictive indicators that you
Mhm.
want to do, but unless you actually take the action to do something based on those indicators, it's not going to
Right.
do anything. If you start coasting, it's not going to work, right?
Right. Or if you start using predictive analytics as a hedging strategy and not do
Yeah.
anything. So I couldn't agree with you more. I thought you'd appreciate that one.
Yep.
Well, let's move on to people strategy and action. We talked about a little bit about fast wins and things happening and people winning, but uh, when organizations commit to aligning their people strategy with business outcomes, we want to really dive into what success actually looks like. So, Chris, can you share a couple of examples of companies that implemented UKG's HCM solution, perhaps, and saw a measurable ROI within, excuse me, within the first year?
Yeah, I
Maybe
love
yeah, go
I love
ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I get so excited talking about this. I love it because we see so many. If you go to our website, you can see tons of case studies that we've done with customers, small customers, mid-sized customers, large customers. Doesn't matter. The entire the whole scope. You'll see the people make really big strides just by implementing a system and committing to taking those actions to making a difference. I'll give you one example. There's a company called Lacom that went from spending about 70% of their time on payroll down to 10% of their time. That, I mean, significant differences there, right? And then the Mike Morris law firm had a 40% reduction on their manual processes. They saw an increase of 20%, 24% on diversity, and a 20%, 26%, 26% reduction on employee turnover as well. And that's really just like, how do you go from being the way you've always been to being a people first company with the software that's there to back up and help you execute on those actions and those decisions.
Yeah, and just that add to that, Chris, too, like it builds momentum. You know, fast wins in and of themselves are a win, but it gets the rest of the organization saying, hey, you know, maybe I should throw my hat in and be the next one to win. It builds momentum. And since we're talking about people in this regard, and not we're not talking about batteries or microprocessors, right? People get it, are naturally change resistant, but if they see other people winning and they see other settings taking place and they're kind of hedging or waiting for somebody else to do something, you know, kind of eases it. So I would just throw out there too that quick wins, fast wins, great ROI, but also communicating all of those wins out is super important to build momentum within the organization and get people excited about the changes that are coming and what could come.
Okay, I'm just gonna jump back in again and say something because this just goes back to our everybody's a leader and communicating transparently and authentically. That has to go back to also recognizing when people have those behaviors in your organization and rewarding them so everybody sees
Mm-hmm.
that it's okay to do this.
Yep.
Right? It's okay. It doesn't matter who you are to do these things, to take these actions, to say, give your opinion. So important.
Want to say anything about this, Chris, or should we move on?
Oh, I can just talk like I feel like we keep saying this over and over again. Companies that focus on being a great place to work, that really has to do with being that people centric, the people forward kind of business, just are out producing their peers. Like there's just so much evidence of that in the marketplace. When you double click into that performance, we find that these great workplaces experience higher levels of productivities. Their employees are more likely to recruit friends and colleagues to their company, people that they want to work with, and they plan to stay there a much longer time. Right? It's just really, it keeps going back to that. There's so much evidence that this works out in the world.
Yeah, and I'm just going to jump in on one point. You know, it's not just to outperform. You could actually say they out people, right?
Oh, I like that. Out people. I'm gonna write that one down.
Anything else on this topic before we move on to help people getting started in the first 90 days?
I I'm just gonna say that as business leaders, sometimes this is a hard conversation to say because it is a hard conversation to say that part of our ROI has to do with taking care of people
Mhm.
and putting people forward, right? But again, the data is there to show that this works. So I would just say trust the data and give it a shot because it's absolutely worth it.
Okay, let's move on to. We wanted to talk a little bit about the first 90 days because we get a lot of questions in our advisory work about, okay, well, this is all great, but how do I get started? So how do we get started? For HR leaders listening who want to take action immediately, what should they think about doing in the first 90 days? Like Michael, what kind of advice do you give people so they can get off to a great start?
Well, we've talked about a lot of things, so let's just ground this back to where we started. This is about being people first, being people centric. And so the first thing is to find out where you are with your people. I mean, there's so many things that we do oftentimes in organizations where we assume the worst or assume the best, and why guess? So you need the baseline, I guess is a nice way of saying it. Kind of find out where you are in relationship to your people. How strong is your employee value proposition? How much are you doing right and how much you're doing wrong, how much white space there is, and really kind of getting this kind of thing off the ground. But the most important thing, just coming from my small corner of the world, is you're going to get a lot of employees that are going to say, what do you mean by people first or people centric? So you have to get out there and define it for folks, and you better really vet it and work really hard. And to Chris's point, talking to someone is a two-way approach. You throw something out and you hear something back. So you need to do a lot of groundwork so that you don't miss the moment, because I think this is one of these moments in companies where there's no takebacks. So that's the first thing, is to level set, get organized, make sure you're clear on what your intentions are. And then the second is you have to incentivize people as to why it's a good idea. And if it's just all about how it's going to make your organization wonderful, that's just wrong road, as they say.
Yeah.
So you better start working on the what's in it for me, for your employees, and again, make it a balanced piece. Third is be clear in your communications. And fourth, there's going to be resistance. Work on it ahead of time. Be proactive with risk mitigation. Try to figure out that. And then the good balance to that is good alignment. Go out and find some best practice champions within your organization. Like it's kind of like that FedEx commercial where the guy said, I thought I said the same thing. And remember, he says, well, you went like this and he went like that. Just getting people within your organizations to say the exact same thing that you as leaders need to say, because it's coming from their peers, their colleagues, makes all the difference. So those are some things to kind of light the fire, in my opinion.
Those are great. So, Chris, from UKG's perspective, what questions should, say, HR, finance, operations, all of them, all those leaders be asking each other to help identify gaps in their people strategy?
Well, I think the very first thing that I would do, and I just to piggyback off of what Michael said there, is your vision clear, and do you believe in it? Right? It's go back to the authentic statement from earlier. People are going to know if you're inauthentic when you're communicating a people first strategy.
Right.
They'll see right through it, right?
Mhm.
And I'm a firm believer that people follow people who are following something.
Right.
So as a leader, if you are very clearly, you have got an objective and you can communicate it and you are passionate about it and you believe it and you are authentically believing in it, the rest of the organization will start to follow. So I think that is the first thing that as a cross-functional leadership team, you have to decide is what is it that we are following? What is it that our company is out to do here and how are we going to communicate that to everybody else? And then the next thing that you do is like, are all of our communications designed to follow that? Because here, that's the other thing, right? I can say this is important, but if my actions don't line up with what's important, it's not actually what's important, right? You
Mhm.
can't say we are people first and then start taking business first actions. You have to be people first and take people first actions that will lead to business first outcomes. Right. So I think that those are really the most important questions that you've got to be asking each other is what is our North Star? What are we headed to? And do we all believe in it? And then are all of our business processes and decisions and communications aligned with that decision?
Yeah, I love that, Chris. I'm going to get that framed and put it in my office. So I'm going to read the transcript and I'm going to get that. I'm going to get that. But and I think what you're poking at too is a lot of that's below the waterline.
Yeah.
That's not going to surface in an engagement survey or,
Right.
running into somebody at the water cooler, getting a cup of coffee and saying, how do you feel about all of this? It's that whole iceberg thing, right? That you're getting at. You have to get to the norms, beliefs, principles.
Mm-hmm.
You have to get way deep with people to understand those intrinsic motivators for them. Couldn't agree with you more. I thought that was a brilliant point.
Well, I put together a few key takeaways as we begin to wrap up here. and based on what we were going to talk about today. And I think these are some good points, but I'm wondering uh, for the two of you, does anything jump out here? Are there other things that you'd love to have people come away with in terms of things they should be thinking about after this conversation?
I'll tell you the one thing that Michael said that I think is really sticking out to me is that you need to know where you are today,
Yeah.
right? So you can say this is where I want to go. Now, if you actually want to take actions on that, you've got to get a baseline of where you are today, where you are right now. And there are two ways to do that, and you should do both of them. You should talk to as many people as possible at your company. You should get people talking about it. It should be in the conversation of your business that this is what we want to achieve, like that kind of action. And then the other is to take a survey. And I know some people are against surveys. Some people don't believe in surveys. Surveys are absolutely a way to know what's going on in your organization as long as you deliver them with trust and authenticity.
Yeah, and I'm going to circle back and reinforce a point that Chris made several times is we all have to get on the same page of what the definition of trust is. And it's
Yeah.
just saying something and you have to believe it. I mean, especially with our next gens, like a great example, right? You get up there and you say something to a next gen. It used to be many years ago when I started, my whole philosophy when I first entered the workforce was just like I was in grade school. Teacher would say, read silently as I read aloud. It was like, that was it. She was, the sun rose and set. Fast forward to 2025, now 2026. Anything you say to your employees, they're going to take it as an opinion, of which they're going to go fact check and talk to all of their posse and check in with everyone. So, again, trust, I think Chris nailed it, is earned. And the only way you can even begin that road are the points that you brought up, Chris, which is you have to be authentic, you have to be meaningful, you have to be purposeful, you have to show inclusionary aspects of that. These are all of the underpinnings. And if someone doesn't like what you're selling, you got to be prepared to understand why and change it. So I would reinforce those points that we are dealing with people in all of this, and not everybody is built the same way. We got to win the hearts and minds of every employee. So I love those points that you brought up, Chris. I mean, it's the soft stuff that's the hard stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other things you want to share before we move on to a couple questions?
Let's go ahead and take some questions.
Sure.
Okay, great. So we asked you for some questions, and you have responded with a few. Feel free to add some others as we go. If we don't get to all of them, we can follow up after the webinar and answer those questions for you. So the first one comes in as a kind of a forward-looking question. As we look ahead to 2026, what's the one capability or trend in HCM strategy that you believe will separate the organizations that thrive from those that struggle? What should leaders be preparing for now that isn't yet on most radars? I think that's a great question.
Yeah, that is a good question.
I'll start with what is probably going to be. It's going to start by feeling like the most obvious answer, but there's a more nuanced answer behind it, and that is the impact of AI on the world.
Mm.
Right? And what that's going to do to our business processes, to the expectations of our employees. Usually when I say, okay, AI is going to change the world, people are like, yes, because it's going to make me more efficient. It's going to make me whatever. Ignore that and start thinking about all the changes it's making to the world in ways that you're not even prepared for yet. And it's going to make it to me, my opinion, where those companies that are people first are the companies that are going to thrive with AI. They're going to embrace the change. They're going to embrace the transformation, and they won't lose sight of the humanness that I believe we're still going to need in order for our businesses to be successful.
I'm going to go old school and say you better focus on the how rather than the what if you're going to get focused on a people first strategy.
That's true. Yep.
Great example of how versus what is I studied chemistry undergraduate, kind of a long story, but anyway, so organic chemistry, final exam, 1 year of studying. professor hands out the final exam and writes the answer in the bottom right-hand corner of the piece of paper and said, I'm automatically going to tell you that's only 2 points. Show me how you get there is what I'm really interested in. Who knew that I would be quoting that, like 40 years later, but it is all about the how. Like it isn't necessarily it's black and white as getting it right or not, because people don't always get it right the first time. And the people-centric approach, you have to fail fast. You got to allow people to fail. The success is variable. Sometimes we make it halfway up the mountain. How many times have people tried to climb K2 and only made it part of the way and they have to come back? They weren't a complete failure because they didn't make it to true success. So we have to recalibrate, focusing on how to achieve a what and what is the spectrum of what under the conditions that we're in. So I would just throw that out as like an old school principle.
Anything else you want to throw up? We've got another one coming up here.
Let's take
Let's
it.
move on. Yeah, let's move on to that. So when organizations start using predictive analytics to identify things like the examples they gave was burnout risks or turnover threats, how do you balance being proactive with maintaining employee trust? Or in other words, how do you prevent it from feeling like Big Brother is watching?
I think a big part of that is two pieces. One, don't be reactive about predictive analytics, right? Because oftentimes what will happen, that your knee-jerk reaction is, oh, this is going to happen. I immediately need to do this to fix it. Instead of looking to say, okay, it's predicted that this is going to happen. What led to that prediction? Right? Because if you actually find out what is leading to that prediction, what are the causes of that prediction, you're most likely going to have a much more measured response than if you're just like I've got to do some emergency procedure right now to get this to stop, right? So I think that's the first piece. And the second is, again, being very open and transparent about anything that you're changing in order to address that predictive analytic. Tell people exactly what it was that you saw, explain to them what analysis you did, like bring them along the journey. Here's the analysis we did. Here's exactly what we figured out was causing this problem. Here, after talking with you, this is like you, the company, here's what we think the best course of action is, and this is what we're going to implement.
Chris, I'm going to steal a page out of your sports analogy. I think the quintessential example of this is when every sports league opens up the draft. So there's what they predict, all the analytics, everything
Right.
else, and then there's really what happens when you pick that player and put them on your team. And I think the point I'm trying to make is we can do a lot of predictions, we can do a lot of analytics, but when we decide to put that person on the field, there are a lot of dynamics like culture, coaching, managing, interaction with others. How does it really feel at that speed? They're coming from college, now they're playing at the pros. You know, it's predictive analytics is great, but it is not the modicum to figuring out exactly what success is going to bring. And so I think predictive analytics is great, but it's the end of the beginning of saying this is our best thought, all things considered, but then the real work begins and whether or not you can make that number one draft choice, become your new franchise quarterback.
You just explained why I'm terrible at fantasy football. I always have I always win the best draft and then I tank after that.
We have time maybe for one more quick question. I think you covered some of this, but we ask it anyway. Maybe this is a good way to end up. For organizations just starting the journey, what's the biggest misconception about building trust that actually can set companies back? In other words, what do leaders get wrong sometimes when they try to create high trust environments?
I'd say that there's a formula you could follow. I think there are behaviors you can change, but I don't think there's a do these three things and it'll increase your trust. I think you've got to change who you are as a company and your behaviors.
Yeah, the quick
Final
thing
thoughts?
I'll say is, like we say in sales and other things where it's a me thing, is trust is going to start with 80%. Do I believe the person across the table for me? And so an organization can't just systemically create trust. Are they training their leaders and coaching their leaders that when they know that the entire trust is going to come down to how they approach that single conversation or that small group conversation, it's going to be 80 to 90% of how they come across, because trust is as much behavior as it is what we say, and oftentimes people will say it's more than the other, and I don't think we do as good a job with that as we need to do. So just remember, you're going to be building trust one employee relationship at a time.
Well, gentlemen, this has been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it. I'm sure our audience has really enjoyed it. We'll leave it there, but I know we could go on for another hour or more, and I really appreciate everything you put into it. I want to thank Michael and Chris, and especially UKG for sponsoring today, and especially all of you for joining us, taking time out of your busy day. I hope this has given you some insight to think about as you go on your people first and people strategy journey. So thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. And we hope to see you again soon on another Brandon Hall Group webinar. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Chris.